Hello chess fans, today I'm going to give you a comprehensive guide of 1b3 and I'm going to show a lot of options that you can play against it to get playable positions, and you can sort of pick which one that you want to use as part of your repertoire. So against 1b3 I'm going to recommend this move e5. Now pretty much all your opponents here are going to play bishop b2 attacking this pawn, and sort of the automatic response knight c6 developing a piece to defend this pawn. And sort of here's the first position where we can possibly branch out. So there is this move c4, but I'll be discussing this later. So we're mainly going to look at e3, and the idea of e3 is I want to get my bishop out, but also I'm controlling some dark squares in the center and sort of helping my bishop out. And so here is the first branch for black. And a lot of people sort of recommend this move, knight f6. And the idea is pretty clear. Okay, you're developing a knight, and it's controlling the center. Now here, by far the main line is bishop b5, and the idea is to attack the knight, which is defending the pawn. And here you have to play this weird move, bishop d6. And this is sort of why I don't personally play this line and don't recommend this line, because, okay, already bishop d6 is a little bit weird. If we had this position with the pawn on d5, okay, it's natural because our other bishop is getting out, but here it's not so natural unless, okay, white takes here and allows us to get our bishop out, but white will never do that. So here, by far, white's main move is knight a3, which is, again, just really weird. Usually you don't put your knight on a3, but here you don't want to block your bishop, right? And you want to go knight c4, so, okay, the most natural move is knight a3, and here, again, black has to play a very, very weird move, knight a5, to prevent knight c4, and yeah, this is sort of why this line, while it is objectively good, it's sort of hard to find over the board, and I think that these sort of setups are sort of a bad idea to keep for your repertoire, because if something is hard to find over the board, then let's say you forget it, you're not going to find it even if you remember these ideas, and even if you do remember these ideas, I'm not so sure this sort of idea actually is applicable to any other type of position. Okay, but the line would continue with bishop e2, and here they're threatening knight b5 to attack our bishop and get rid of their horrible knight, so we play a6 to prevent that. They would go c4, preventing d5, and here after castles, knight c2 for example, rook e8, d3, bishop f8, we can look forward to c5, knight c6, and d5, and black should honestly be slightly better probably. Now this is not the optimal line for white whatsoever, but this is sort of an example of how things can go. So this is one option you can choose. Now after knight f6, they also have another option. They have this move knight f3. The idea is they're attacking the e4 pawn. So here you're going to go for the move e4. Okay, the most natural move, attacking the knight. And after knight d4, something like takes. And here the position is sort of roughly in the balance. But honestly, I don't really like black's position too much. It feels like this e4 pawn is a little bit too over committed. So a sample line might continue bishop e7. And this is by no means forced, but this is sort of what the position might look like. And here black has a lot more space, but their e7 bishop is bad, and white generally has okay development here. And if white can get rid of the d pawn for the e pawn, then black will have a backwards pawn on d6 and a weak d5 square, so the position is roughly equal. So the final move they can play after knight f6 is this move c4, and this sort of transposes to the English, and I will be discussing this very briefly. So here you can go for this move d5, but you're sort of justifying their setup after it takes. They have the open c file, but also they can get their bishop to b5. So the real question is, okay, why would we actually justify their setup? So I think the simplest move is actually g6 here, and here you're just going to switch to a King's Indian. And the reason why is because in the King's Indian, often white can play this move b4, a3, b4, and try to expand, but here white has played b3, which sort of doesn't align with their plan against the King's Indian, and a sample line might continue knight f3, d6, d4, bishop g7, d5, knight e7. And here already you can see, okay, white's usual idea in the King's Indian is to go c5 with b4, but okay, we played b3 already. Here we're going to have to waste the move. And then blacks just continue with a totally normal King's Indian, which is, okay, not the best sort of setup, but again, we have an improved version of it, so we should be quite happy. So yeah, that's sort of how you would play knight f6. And while that's not a sort of comprehensive guide of playing knight f6, that's generally the way that you can play it. And if you like those type of positions that you saw, you can definitely try this out. And if you want to play sort of the most popular thing, the most tested by grandmasters, knight f6 is definitely the way to go. But I'm going to recommend this move d5, and it's sort of way more natural because of the fact that, okay, white allowed us to put 2 pawns in the center. What have, anyone who has ever taught us chess told us? When you can put 2 pawns in the center, put 2 pawns in the center. Okay, so here white really only has one move to justify their setup, bishop b5, pinning the knight and also threatening this pawn. And here I just wanted to offer a gambit. So if you are under, let's say like 2200, let's say online, then I would highly recommend this move knight e7. And I'm actually not going to delve too deep into it because it is actually probably the best move. And you might say, wait, how is this the gambit? Okay, it's because you're giving up the e5 pawn because, okay, your knight is pinned. And at first it looks really dumb, But I highly recommend looking at this yourself if you are a lower rated player, because not a lower, intermediate to under 2200 rated player, because it's a very tricky line. At the higher level, I used to play this very, very often, and often with a lot of success a few years back, but not really anymore, because I found that even these like 1600 rated over the board players, they know their lines too well. And I'm actually going to show you a game today I played against a player who's around 1500, and I didn't play this line, but I checked his previous games because he was having an amazing tournament, and he played this line like an engine basically. So I did not want to do this, and this is often, it's very risky to sack pawns when your opponent could really know the line, and this is now a very popular line against the Nimzo-Larsen, so these players will get it a lot. And okay, if you don't play against the Nimzo-Larsen a lot, you're not going to know it as well. So that's why I generally don't recommend playing this gambit line, though it is definitely something that you can check out, and if you like this, it's definitely a good option. I just think that these days b3 players know too much. So instead I recommend bishop d6, which is the main line. And you might say, oh wait, how would they know knight e7 more than bishop d6, which is the main line? It's because when you're a high level player playing this move 1b3, every single player is playing this knight e7 move. Anytime I've ever played b3, even for fun, everyone plays knight e7, and everyone knows it, whether you're a club player or like a high level player. It's sort of something that everyone knows, and I don't think it's something that everyone should really be playing. Okay, so here white has a really only two options basically. They have to attack this e5 pawn, because that's sort of the base of their operation. And if they can get rid of the e5 pawn, okay, look, now the g7 pawn is hanging. So here the most natural move maybe is, okay, knight f3, attacking the pawn and, developing a piece. But I think that this is actually slightly a mistake because of this move f6. And while you should probably never play f6 in this specific scenario, it's actually a really good move because of the fact that black cannot attack the center. For example, a lot of players here, the most common move in the online database is to go for d4, attacking the center. And okay, if black does nothing, like a dumb move like, after d4, if they play a dumb move like knight e7, okay, white setup, sort of makes perfect sense here. Now that the fact that they can take here, now this is extremely weak, and maybe here they immediately have tactics like this. Or they're just winning a pawn there. So don't play that move. Instead play e4, attacking the knight, and after here you just have pretty much a perfect win-aware. And you sort of have a perfect win-aware because in the win-aware your knight would be here blocking the f-pawn, but here you got f5. So you sort of have the perfect position, and the bishop is not doing anything on b2. So they won't go probably d4, or if they do, it's a bad move. So here after c4, you can play this move a6, attacking the bishop, and okay, the bishop only has one response to take. And for example, after castles, here's the only important thing to remember. When you have this f6 setup, the rest of those moves don't matter, but when you have this f6 setup, generally the knight wants to go on h6. And you might say, okay, wait, why do I not want to go knight e7? Doesn't that look like a natural square to developing? And the reason is usually the queen actually wants to go to e7. And also, if they go for this d4 move, you want to be able to meet it with e4 and f5. So you don't really want the knight here where it blocks the queen's ability to attack. And finally, the knight can often go to f7 and e5 in the case that the e-pawn moves, or it can go to g4 and pressure along this diagonal. So knight h6 is the last move that I would recommend remembering. So instead of knight f6, they also have this move c4. Now this is sort of a tricky move. It's not a move that you'll see often. It's sort of trying to combine the English with the Nimzo-Larsen. And their main idea is, okay, they've gotten the bishop outside the pawn chain, now they go c4, now that the bishop's not going to be stuck there. But there's a reason why the bishop sort of usually has to be stuck there. And for example, after knight e7, something like this, I just wanted to give a sample line. This is not a very good line for black at all. The engine actually already gives like minus 0.6 or minus 0.7. But here, for example, you can go for this move castles, which looks like it's sort of giving up this pawn because okay, we get rid of a defender now and then take here. But after rook e8, knight f3, bishop a6, believe it or not, like white is already completely lost. They can't castle, and not to mention knight f4 is a threat to threaten here, and knight d3, and they just literally just cannot defend against it. A move like d4 might be tried here, but then after this, it's game over, and white can pretty much just resign. So yeah, that's just a way that white can lose really quickly without the light squared bishop. That's why the light squared bishop has to stay here to protect these light squares. So yeah, that's what to do after knight f3. This is a move that you probably won't see anymore because of the fact that f4, which is the main move, is much more common these days. So after f4, There's a few moves you can try here. So probably the most common move is Queen H4. And honestly, if you just want to forget about the rest of this video, I would just play this move Queen H4 because it's the simplest sort of move. And it's the sort of thing that you need to know the least. So what's the idea? The idea is after G3, Queen E7, we've created this weakness with G3. And this sort of made their light squares even weaker. Now the bishop could sometimes come to H3 and prevent them from castling. So here they'll go for this move Knight F3, and they really don't have another option. If they take here now, we can just take with the bishop, Knight F3, and here we go for F6, defending the pawn. And here they're going to develop their knight with this move Knight C3, and they don't go Knight A3 now because there's no point. There's nowhere for the knight to go. And here you can play this move Bishop E6, Queen E2, and a position like this arises when it's about equal. Now you can also play this move Queen F7, the idea of which is to allow this move Knight E7. Oops, sorry about that. To allow this move Knight E7 and okay, have more harmonious development, because right now the knight, okay, it can go there, but it's sort of a little bit offside, and you know, knight on E7 now makes a lot of sense because the knight nicely defends this pawn here. So you can either play Bishop E6 or Knight E7 or Queen F7, Knight E7. Either of them makes sense, and that's sort of all you need to know for this line. But in the game that we're going to look at, I play this move F6, and sort of to keep more consistent, to, you know, not make us have to force us to memorize it as much, because the fact that, okay, we're just playing F6 no matter what against Knight F3 and F4, we play F6. Now, also, another reason that I really like this move F6 is because there's a little bit of a trap here. So after takes, it may look like white can have a tactic here. Notice when you look for a tactic, you always look for hanging pieces or undefended pieces and checks. And here I think we have both of them. After takes, notice that this has one defender, which is the bishop, but also has one attacker, and there's also this check here, which can bring another attacker. So is white winning here? For example, after takes, Queen H5, oh, white's winning. They're picking up the bishop, and we have to move our king. So is black actually losing in this line? No. And it's for a counter trick, Queen H4, attacking the king, and after G3, Queen E4 with the fork. And this is game over here, as white has no way to not have severe material loss. So that's sort of a trap that you can get a lot of players here. I've actually gotten even like very high rated players with this trap. So we'll look at more at takes later. But here they also have this move Queen H5, and the idea of which is just to sort of make white do the same thing, play G6, and then they can go Queen H4. And this G6 move sort of makes this diagonal weaker. Now I don't want to get too lost in this variation, so after takes, Queen E7, Knight E2, Bishop D7. Here white is much better because the ideal setup for, black is much better because the ideal setup for white is to have this knight on F3 and have this knight on D2. And in this position, they have literally done neither, and the idea is to get to E5. And this bishop is sort of making their development so strange, and they're going to lose this bishop pair too. So here, black is sort of going to win most of the games. And a sample line might continue like castles, queenside castles, knight here, D4, takes here, bishop C5, Knight E2, and here you have a nice tactic, Queen E2, because the knight can't take back. So that's just a sample line of how things might go, but yeah, this Queen H5 move is not to be feared. And finally, after instead they have this final move, Knight C3, which is the best move. And if your opponent really knows their lines well as B3, in this line, I think white is actually fully equalizing, and I don't think that black can have any advantage here. So here you have to play this move Knight E7, defending your pawn. And here now their idea is to go Queen H5. And you might say, okay, wait, why did they want to provoke Knight E7 first? And you're going to see why in a second. After G6, here Queen H4 makes no sense anymore because we can just castle, and then, okay, the pawn is defended by the rook. So that doesn't really make sense. So instead of that, they will go for Queen F3. Also, Queen H4 gets hit by Knight F5 in the future. And then here, you can go for this move E4, attacking the queen after Queen F2 castles. What white has achieved here is that they've gotten their pieces to actually have harmonious development, because now this knight has not come into E2. So we don't have to get that weird setup. We can go this knight to E2 and, you know, try to develop this with maybe G4 and develop this knight later, actually allowing our bishop to keep open on the long diagonal. And so here actually white is probably about equal, and the position is very difficult for both sides. So you can use this at your caution, or you can play that move Queen H4 that I mentioned earlier. But now I'm going to look at what actually happened in my game. So this was a game at the Canadian Open that I played maybe like 5-ish months ago. And so I was against around a 1560 rated opponent, and my rating, by the way, was 2250. Or at the time, I would think it was like 2210. And you might think, okay, wait, you should just win this game every time. You're over like 700 points higher rated. And while it is true, this guy had already had a rating performance of 2300. He had a rating performance higher than mine in the tournament at the time. And he had beaten some players. And he was also suspected of cheating. Now, I won't say who this player is, but I think they also know that they were suspected for cheating. Now, whether they cheated or not, okay, I can't really tell you. But I know at the time, I thought that they had cheated. And that can sort of affect the way you play a game. It sort of makes you less confident. It makes you think, oh, there's nothing I can really do. And if he beat me, I was just going to be very, very sad because, okay, he'll make me lose like 100 rating points basically. And also he's a 1500 who everyone suspects of cheating. So I don't really feel good if I lose to that. But regardless of whether they cheated or not, which I don't think they did in the end because they started calming down and their eventual rating performance was around like 1900 or 2000. So it was still a tough game for sure. So I hadn't really looked at any lines. I was sort of just playing this on intuition. And here they played takes. I took back. And here they played knight f3. And here I wanted to go over some nice moves here. So here for a long time I calculated this move queen e7. And the idea is to just defend the pawn. But here I was worried about takes and this move knight takes e4. And the idea is after takes here they have this move queen h5 with this fork. And I don't know. Here I would even just be losing a rook. So I was worried about that, but here I saw this move queen h4, which is a similar tactic that we have, and after g3 I saw this move queen e4, but then I saw that they just have castles. And if I try to take here, they have queen h5 again, just winning this piece outright. So I can't do that, so this queen e4 tactic doesn't work, and I really didn't know any other tactic like this, but here apparently you have this move queen h3, and I'm just going to give a dumb engine line. After knight f3, you have takes here. Which, okay, that's not the dumb engine line. The dumb engine line is after queen e2, preventing the infiltration and also preventing takes here because that knight's still there. You can go knight f6, knight c3, just hangs the knight, sorry. But knight f3, castles here, bishop g4, for example, castles. And after knight e4, apparently, or sorry, after queen h4, rook f1, and now knight e4, apparently white is just completely lost. Excuse me, I've been speaking for a long time, so I'm going to try to wrap this video up soon. So another move, a dumb move, is knight h6, and yeah, again, this is the best move, and the idea is to meet this tactic, like queen h5 with knight f7, defending the pawn. And if takes here, you have this move g6, removing the defense. So that's sort of the general idea. And yeah, I just didn't really even consider that because knight h6 is just such a weird move. Now that I've moved my f pawn, I just really want to put the knight on f6. So I went for bishop g4, he went h3, takes, and here I went knight f6. And my opponent, seemingly doing the most natural thing, played this move c4, thinking that if takes, he can take here, and he has a lot of pressure on the position. But here I just ignored him, castled, and oh, this does blunder a pawn, but if he takes, I have knight b4, which I think just wins the game on the spot. I have way too many threats here that he can't really deal with all of them. For example, if he plays a move like knight a3, defending one of these, I think takes here, attacking the queen, and then a6, and then e4, and then here, he should be completely losing. So instead he took here, I took back, he castled, and here I went for knight e4, attacking the queen. And here time is really of the essence because of the fact that if you're slow here as black, you can lose the game, or so you can lose your advantage because of the fact that you don't have, your only advantage here is your development lead. Here, notice he can't take because I can take with the bishop. So he went queen f2, I took, went queen h4. The idea is to bring the other rook into the game. He went for knight c3 developing here, queen e1, and here I went for a nice move, knight g3. And the idea is to go for rook f1, and I win the queen next. So he can't really do anything about it. So he took here, I went rook f1, takes, I went queen e4. And all of this was given by my space advantage in combination with my development advantage. I went queen e4, attacking the knight, knight c3, queen c2, attacking the bishop. The bishop went back, and here, okay, I was like very confident that I would win this game now. It's very relieving if you know that your opponent is suspected of cheating, and then you play a pretty nice game, and they play sort of just like you would expect a 15 or 1600 to play. And here I went for h6 because if you notice, what does white do to improve their position? They can't move the knight, they lose this pawn. They can't move this pawn, they lose this knight. They can't move this rook, they lose this bishop. They can move this pawn, then I get this square, and they probably lose too. So they can't do anything. So I just played h6, just making sure that I can never get back rank mated. And even though this is a useless move, like, okay, it's a very human move, and the fact that you can never lose once you play h6. So rook e1, I played e4, not even allowing them to play e4. They went king f2, doing nothing. I went bishop e5, threatening this. Now that this is pinned, they went here. And here I probably should have just take, and gone here. And then after like b4, queen c2, they have no way to defend this. But okay, I was too greedy, and I played a5. And you might say, wait, how is that greedy not grabbing material? And the reason why is because I'm greedy in the fact that I want to get that same line with takes, but after b4, I wanted to play a4. Which is just completely unnecessary. Like, you could have just gone and won the other pawn, but yeah, I don't know why even I did this. So here they play king g1, which doesn't do anything. They could play a3 in this position, and after takes here, they've sort of relieved a lot of their problems. Okay, no, sorry, they can't play that, but I don't know, like king g1 maybe, so that they can take here next. Makes a lot of sense. And here they've actually defended their pawn here, and it's not as easy to win as the previous position was. For example, after takes, like, okay, it looks like they kind of have like a fortress or something. Like, how do I actually make progress? I probably could, but it's more difficult. But instead they went king g1, which just makes it so easy, because after takes here, I go a4, and okay, the game's over at this point. They're going to have to give up this bishop for this pawn, but we can see how I went. Queen f1, or king f1, I went a3. And here, really, they should just take, but it doesn't matter anyways. They went rook e2, queen b1, rook e1, a2, and here I'm even making another queen. I didn't even give them the chance to sacrifice their bishop for the pawn. Okay, so yeah, that's in today's video, guys. If you learned something about how to play against 1b3, then please let me know in the comments, and if you finished this far, thank you. Yeah, this was a little bit of a different video, because usually I do videos where I explain openings in sort of a more light tone, with explaining not just like engine lines or common grandmaster lines, but instead explaining sort of ideas and explaining it to a beginner. But this one, I felt like b3, you should probably just outright just be refuting it, to be honest, because, or not refuting it, but trying to get as good of a position as possible. There's no really ideas that you can use with the 1e5 move order I recommend. You can also you can just play a London, or you can just play King's Indian, and those are sort of more idea oriented against 1b3. But in this repertoire, I just said, okay, we're gonna try to punch it as much as possible, and that's what I hope I gave you. So if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.